Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's Zoom discussion. We will have Graeme Finn speaking on management and establishment of perennials tonight. Leave your questions in the question chat box and I will read them out loud after, and Graeme will answer at the end of his presentation. Tomorrow, we will have Grant Lestuka speaking on the economic side of perennials. Your Zoom link that worked for tonight will work for that as well tomorrow. And with that, I will pass it over to Graeme and he can begin.
Thanks, Amber. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. This will be the last week of me and Grant, and then next week we'll have a producer and from a couple of guys, maybe just one. We'll see who we can line up, and then yeah, go from there. But this is going to be all on perennial pastures tonight, and if anyone's got any ideas on this from different areas, what works for them, and don't be afraid to chime in and give your opinions too. I think these are some of the most important things that we should be doing right now for our industry to cut costs. I'm more proud of what I do when people ask me, you know, I don't tell them I got $2.30 calves. I'm more proud that it cost me $1 a day to feed them in the winter or summer. I rent land, so that's a little different for my perennial pastures. I'm up around $1.50 to $1.70 with all my costs in. But for my summer, if I can, for my winter, if I can say that, you know, I did a cow for $1.07 a day, and that's what I'm really proud of, because we've got to push this number down. But what we're going to talk to tonight is just some ideas, what I've done with myself and then other people we work for. Both Grant and I and Roger and the union crew have a string of people that, you know, we just go and visit and make sure they're on the right step or a sounding board. So with that, we'll get on with it. And so those who you were there last week, I'm going to use this slide again because I think it's relative for what we do on our perennial side. It's a part of a system. Annuals and perennials work together. So if you're a cropping man and livestock, you know, you can blend them together with your annual side. But if we're grazing guys like we all are, then, you know, you don't have to have cover crops to have soil health. It's about regenerative systems that work for you. So the top one there is diversity in your forages, diversity in your grazing patterns, diversity in your livestock that go in there. We can have, if you've got goats and sheep, or you've got cattle, goats and sheep, or you've got yearlings, or you've got a cow-calf operation. It's diversity. Make it work for what you're going to do. So that word diversity covers a big picture with everything. So, and then there's crop residue. Always leave crop residue. It doesn't matter a perennial or annual. We need that barrier, especially when this warmer weather. We need that shade cloth on top of the soil. We need to keep the soil cool. That's when our roots perform better. And then same with your annual cover crops. Leave an armor on your soil. Let that thatch on top of the soil, keep the water cool, retain moisture. These go hand in hand with perennials and annuals. And same with cover crops. It doesn't have to be a cover crop, doesn't have to be an annual. A great cover crop is a perennial. If you come up to me and ask, you know, I want to go cover crops, I'll ask, why do you want to go cover crops? Well, I want diversity, I want soil health. Okay, are you in a crop rotation? No, I'm not. I'll push them straight away over to perennials. Cost effective. It's going to cost them $65, $70 an acre, whatever, once of seed, plus all your implementation going into putting it in the ground. So think about it. Do I need cover crops? Yes, for winter swath grazing. Okay, let's do that. But if you've got a different plan for winter, then you want to go cover crops just for the hell of it, look at perennials every day in the week. You'll have 10 years, 12 years of well-managed system to get these forages doing exactly what you want. They're still performing a cover crop role, but they're perennials, which all leads into soil health and nutrient recycling. Soil health, it doesn't matter what system's in the soil. that's a good system to have. We're still sequestering carbon. We're still getting atmospheric energy into the root system, but it's done either way, perennial, annual. It does not have to be an annual. And then nutrient recycling, like I said, leaving a thatch on the soil and getting that rotting in. The biology, the worms, the microbes will just grab them and take them into the soil. But the nutrient recycling rolls into the cattle integration. I personally don't think anything we do can't be done with livestock, without livestock. We need that impact of the cattle back on our soil so we can get the fertility from them and the biology from their rumen and the hoof action, and they're eating the forages, which they're recycling back through themselves back into the soil, plus the plants rotting at the end of the season into the soil. And livestock husbandry, my wife and I first started out with more yearlings than cows. We were running 1,000 grass yearlings for about 10 years. And I always selected from farms, and I selected because I selected temperament first. I wanted cattle that would respect my fencing. I wanted cattle that respected us, but cattle that were easy to train. And then with the livestock husbandry with the cows, we want cows that do well on your operation. I've bought cattle in as replacement heifers from some of my friends, and they just haven't been able to do what they've done on the cattle that are born and bred on the place. So that's something to think about in the long term. Is if you're in a cow building situation, really look at your own females, because they've been on your place, they've performed, and you take those heifers out of those cows and start infiltrating them into your cow herd. It's going to be the best, strongest herd you'll have ever had. And I know that from my past in Australia. We hardly bought outside cattle into the place because they just didn't cut it for our soil type, our grazing management. So yeah, livestock husbandry, it's kind of what we have to do. We have to stop being cowboys and be more stockmen and really observe the big picture of what we're doing. That's how they were in the old days. They were all stockmen. And then water infiltration, doesn't matter if perennials and annuals, we get those root systems in. We'll have perennial root systems breaking down in the soil and adding organic matter, which is more moisture holding capacity. We've got that shade cloth, which is the moisture efficiency. So the shade cloth, the root systems in the soil, I said this last week, for every 1% of organic matter we can add to our soil, and it takes a while, it doesn't happen overnight, that can add 45,000 litres of water holding capacity. We talked about the solar panels bringing atmospheric energy and sequestering carbon. And those solar panels are also forages. That's what we graze. That's what puts pounds and milk on cattle and cows and yearlings. And then rest times. There's always one paddock in our whole system that doesn't get grazed that year. It's resting, it's setting seed, it's building root systems, it's building leaf matter up top, the solar panels, and it's just taking it easy. But it'll be the first paddock the cattle will go into. And especially if you've got high legume pastures with your sandfoin and your vetches and your clovers and birdsfoot trefoil, those things will go through the rumen and then start spreading themselves all over the place. And I'll show you some great pictures of that. And this family time again for regenerative system, nobody's paying us to do this, so don't forget the family. That's what my wife says. And until we start getting recognized for what we do, for having a regenerative system and sequestering carbon, we're doing all this to push our bottom line down, because right now the people out there want us to be regenerative, they want us to be environmentally friendly, but they're not paying us for us. They'll go to a store and they'll look at the different steaks. Here's the CRSB, Canadian Round Table Stonewall Beef logo on this steak here. We know that, you know, Graeme and his friends have all done this, but then they see the price. Okay, it's $10 for that steak, and then they'll see the commodity cattle. Then they'll see the Argentinian or Australian. They like the thought, but when it comes down to buying it, we'll go with the Argentinian or American. So we're doing all this to better our bottom line, not better our top line. We're pushing this line down. So family time is pretty important now to us, and it should be important to everyone because, you know, it's something, the family is the big root of the operation on our place and everybody's place. And then allowing the system to work. So this doesn't happen overnight. Don't get these false things that, you know, you plant this and it's a miracle. It takes time to build. Okay, so here we go talking about our perennial forages. And these are the questions you ask yourself when you start down this track of, you know, I've got an exhausted pasture. Why do I want to rejuvenate my pasture or start a new stand? How am I going to do it? The fertility, what type of forages? The grazing use, am I going to have bloat issues, or I want more legumes to improve the milk production on my females? Paddock sizes, weed control, water, and soil. We're going to talk about this all the way through. So these are just some topics that we'll just headers so we can start with, get some ideas going. Okay, this is out at Scepter at Leader, Saskatchewan. This is Bert Anderson's. Right up the back here, that is the Sand Hills of Saskatchewan right there. This is Bert's paddock here. You know, when you ask yourself why, well, it's not productive. We've got some intermediate wheatgrass here, some crested wheatgrass, and a lot of open spots. So after going for a walk and talk, we thought, you know, geez, man, you've got a good base here, but you've got tons of room all through here that we can put new plants in. So why do we need to cultivate? Why do we need to take this out? So this is where we started a year and a bit later. So we went in there in May. This is in 2016, I think. Good years, good wet years. So you're seeing this here, and you say, yep, we've got plenty of space. Why not just put some legumes, some brome grass in here? There's some softleaf tall fescue. There's some hairy vetch, size of milk vetch, and there's some alfalfa and sandpoint. So what we decided, let's just do zero tills straight into what we have right here. And then we lock it up. We leave it for a year. We got to get the root systems under these new plants building for their first winter. If we start chewing these down too much, going into their first winter, then that's when we're going to get winter kill. So take your time with this. Make sure that you have other grass over here that you can say, okay, I can afford to lock this paddock up. And you can see the cows back down the bottom corner here. They never came into this paddock for the whole year. So get a padlock, lock it up, and then you can fall graze it, right? Maybe after freeze up, if you're kind of short, okay, let's go and put some cattle in there, but lightly graze it. Use it for snow trap, and it'll get a good start in the spring, but don't rush it. So these are the questions. Why? Because we haven't got a very good pasture stand here. We need to rejuvenate. Do we need to cultivate it? No. Let's put just some legumes, a little bit of grass. Okay, how? This is a great, I added to some stuff in here tonight, but sod seeding in here, and then cultivated land, get it all fine and smooth and everything, then that looks perfect to a grain guy. But how much time do you want to spend on this? So we'll talk about the two of them. Okay, so this is some pasture stand here we're taking out. This is some rented land that I had. And what I did, I took the old stand out and just sprayed it out the fall before. But I went and hit it up with Roundup. Instead of putting perennials back in here, there's two options you could do. If this is clean like this is, we had a really good stand, we can add new seed in here, okay? And new perennial grasses, no problems at all. But if this is kind of dirty and had some thistle in there, so let's think, okay, maybe we should do better weed control. So all you have to do is go and put a triticale oats in here, you know, have it so you can use an MCPA, 2,4-D, curtail. Have it something, yeah, we can control it. There's no problem. We can go and graze those all summer long, still do a spray, keep it under control. Or if you're lucky enough that we don't have weeds in here, and then we can go and seed straight in. This cost back in the day, with the seed the prep was $175 an acre. Okay. This here, and back in the day, it'd be triple both of them probably now. This was over $250 an acre before the seed to get it like this. So think about all this stuff here, the old root system rotting down and making soil. You're keeping A, B, and C horizons right where they're supposed to be, and they're not getting disturbed in the A horizon going down to B horizon and so on and so on. So sod seeding is a really good way if you can get the right piece of equipment, and you can use a big drill too. You don't have to have a special equipment, but just remember the bottom line here is 1/2 inch seeding depth. Before we start, we'll start from the bottom up, I guess. Get a soil test, see what your soil's doing, especially these days with the way fertilizer costs are right now. Get that soil test, see what we need, because we do need to start a plant in here. We're probably low on N and P for sure. So, get that and you'll know we're not over applying or under applying. It'll be the best thing you do when you start out. No nurse crops. I should have talked about this today, but nurse crops, I thought when I came to Canada, I thought, geez, that's a hell of an idea. Nurse crops, I've never heard it before. And I went and did it. This is years ago. And I thought, yeah, and guys say, oh, it suppresses the weeds. It conserves moisture. And I got to thinking, how does an oat plant here distinguish alfalfa or thistle, either side of it? So when it says suppressing weeds, how does it know it's not suppressing the alfalfa as well as the thistle? So I kind of looked at that, especially last year. If you had a nurse crop in there, you've got issues with moisture, and those annuals did really well, and the perennials didn't, because the perennials, they know they've got a lifetime to live, where the annuals, they know they have to get up and grow, reproduce, and then die. So think about that. If you can get away with it, I'm not saying no in some high moisture areas, but in low moisture areas, you really got to think about it. Is it worth it? And get the seed in, get in early. You can get it in early May. Some guys, the moisture starts dwindling off towards the middle of summer. But then if we get some rain in August, if we get some rain late July, early August, we can still go and put a perennial stand in. But we've got to get in before the frost, because we want that solar panel and the root systems developed to get ready for its first winter. So it's just a couple of things to think about when you're getting a stand organized. Okay, this is a great example of no nurse crops and with nurse crops. So this is at Catalan's feedlot, really dry, sandy soil. The boys out there, Mick Taylor and his crew, they did exactly what we said. No nurse crops. This was seeded in 2016. This photograph was taken May 18th, the following year, and we had no nurse crops in here. My ranch is just over the hill here. This is WA Ranch. This is University Ranch. Their agronomist insisted on a nurse crop. This photo was taken on the 18th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. This photo here was taken at 5:15 in the afternoon, the same day. Exact same forage blend and almost the same fertilizer package. A little more over here with MEC with the sandy soil, but this is good, heavy, dark soil here. And so this just shows, okay, look what this has done. The nurse crop, all the oats in here, has really played havoc with the perennial grasses. So we end up stitching a little bit of extra legumes in there just to pep it on, but you may as well do it right. I know it's a waste of a paddock a whole year, but when you're banking on good forages for a long time, think about what you can do. Okay, this is another paddock of mine. I rented this land towards Airdrie. This paddock, it was, as you can see, brome grass, a little sparse brome grass, not very healthy, dark, a light green. So I went and seeded, it was, I can't remember, it was 7 or 9 pounds an acre of straight Algonquin alfalfa in here. Just thinking I would lose some winter, I'd had some weed issues. I'd had some weed issues, so I'd try and choke them out a little bit. But I also thought, well, I'm going to have some plant loss because I'm going to seed into a existing live stand. Anyway, the following year, this is what it looked like. The Algonquin did tremendously. It smothered the brome out, but that paddock 3 years later was almost a 50-50 stand of grasses. There was some old orchard grass that came up. There was some fescues, and then the brome really came away. So something like this, you can go all whole hog, or now we've got our sandfoin and vetches. We can have non-bloating legumes in there as well. So these kind of things to think about when you're doing a pasture stand. It was scary at the very beginning, but now I can open the gate here and just kick them straight in, and we've got no problems at all. So sod seeding like that was really effective. It was over effective, but it was simple. It was just a cheap alfalfa going in there, and away we went. Okay, this is sod seeded into sandy soil up at Bymore. This is Terry Mappin's, Brad and Terry's, and you can see here on this bottom corner, this is what the pasture stand looked like. Old alfalfa, open sort of areas like this, kind of dark, kind of light grass stand there. It's there, but it's not. Brad went in with his drill. He's just his John Deere drill, cropping drill, and stitched in some legumes and a little bit of grass. But you can see the color already. The old alfalfa is still up here, but look at all the legumes just popping here now. One simple thing, one pass, half-inch seeding depth, and away you go. Lock it up for a year and let it do its thing. You don't need to have specialty equipment. If you can get a half-inch seeding depth, that's where your mark is. You've got to make that half-inch seeding depth. It's almost like scratching the soil open, but as long as you've got a packing wheel that we can push that down with, that's fine. Seed heavy. I don't know how many times I've heard guys say, oh, this guy said you don't need that much. You're just trying to sell us extra seed. Sell us extra seed. Mate, I seed the same rate myself, and in irrigation, we'll go heavier. So I want cover. I don't want places where a dandelion can come through. If it's 15 pounds an acre and you've got a good solid thatch like this, you've got no issues whatsoever. You'll have a good solid stand for a long time. You won't have dandelions coming through. You'll have the thatch working in conjunction with each other in the forages and limiting the spaces that you can see where your dandelions and thistles can come through and bare soil. This is down here. This is down here at, this is on the bench. This used to be James Hargrave's land, if some of you remember James. This is where James kind of tested us and said, this guy from this company said that, he recommends only 10 pounds an acre. And so I said, well, okay, let's do half and half. So there's half section of land. This is owned by West Bench Colony now, this land, since James has passed. They bought it off the estate. This is 10 pounds an acre right here in this paddock. And then over here is 15 pounds an acre. This paddock is, I think it's about 2 years later that we can still see the results of underseeding. We've left a ton of room here for some impact. And the soil is warmer than it is over here too. So think about it. This is not a split shot, as you can see with the clouds. It's just, okay, James did here and he did here, same fertilizer and away you go. So think about that, especially in climates where it's all right for me here in the foothills because we normally have really good season, doesn't take too much to grow stuff over here. But you guys who are down south or in harsher climates along the border of Alberta and Saskatchewan, just think about, you're only doing it once, so you may as well get that in there and get it done right. Okay, let the cattle do the fertilizing. These cattle can do everything for you. They can fertilize, they can spread seed, they can rejuvenate your pasture. So these are the yearlings. There's 500 head on a section of land, and this paddock was cut up into 50-acre cells. So it was very heavy foot traffic, a lot of manure, but they were only there for about about 3 to 5 days at a time to move through. These cattle were almost getting ready to move right now. So that's they've taken half and we're getting ready to move. But I'm going to show you what these cattle can do. So use them to your advantage. Cattle can seed legumes. Most legumes, all the ones that I know, are hard shelled. Okay, so you can put legumes in the manure, legumes in their mineral, or they can eat it and distribute it. This one here is in the spring. This is at my place. We put 1 baked bean tin of legumes into 1 bag of mineral. And so every time we top our mineral up, I take a little can, tip it in there, stir it in, and let the cattle do the rest. And I've heard a lot of guys, oh, it won't survive the room. And clovers, vetch, sandfoin, bird's foot trefoil. If you can bite them and it almost breaks your teeth, it'll be fine. Sure, there'll be some when they regurgitate the gut and they chew their cud. Sure, there's going to get some, but there's some not. So it's a 50-50 chance of success. But, you know, it's better than dragging a drill out as well, right? So cattle, this is just diversity of livestock. This is right next door to our place. I run my replacement heifers on it. I've never had a seed drill on this place at all. It's a quarter land. I've got it cut up, as you can see, but this place, all this size of milk vetch here has come through the mineral. The mineral and the cattle have worked together to do this. So if you've got bushland, you know, you can't get a machine in, buy hay with size of milk vetch or sandfoin or clover or bird's foot trefoil. Buy hay that's got that. And you can use that to go and to help rejuvenate. The cattle eat it. It'll get shit out all over the place, or it'll stay right where the bale is. This is my yearling paddock. Brenda might remember this. This is at Crossfield. So that was that picture with that yearlings. But at the end of the season, this 5-acre paddock has never, ever had a seed drill in it. All this size of milk vetch has come from around the cells around it. And this is a trucking paddock that only gets used for about 2 or 3 days a year. Towards the end, well, at the end of the season, so I accumulate them all in here, and then they get shipped off at the in 2 or 3 days' time. So all this paddock, as you can see, solid sizer right now, has really come in because of the livestock coming in and having its impact. It's done its hoof action, it's suppressed, it's pushed seed into the soil, but the cattle have done the distributing at the same time too. Okay, and here's another bale grazing. Especially this year, guys say, oh, geez, you know, it's going to, hay is so expensive. You know, what are we going to waste? How much is it going to cost them per day to do this? Sure, it's going to cost you the bale a day or 10 bales a day. And you've got to think of the waste as not as waste. Actually, I am bale grazing this year, first time ever. We had a spray operator spray the wrong chemical and killed all our cover crop mix out, and all I've got is 40 pounds of triticale per acre. So I've started bale grazing. This isn't my picture, it's up at Pine Haven Colonies. But what is waste? You can see all the manure accumulating around here right now, right? Got some litter right here, in here. So we are getting organic matter onto the soil. This is the paddock the following year. The boys up there, they wanted to plow all this out and start again. We had a really good grass base. We had some clover in there too. So why not try and fertilize it? And they, oh, we're not spending money on fertilizer. You solid grass guys should look at fertilizing. 20% of our bill at the last property I managed in Australia was for fertilizer. And that got us more grazing days per acre. Our stocking rate was up. and it helped us through droughts because we had a well-developed root system. But get a soil test so you know what fertilizers to use. So without any application of fertilizers, we've got this effect here. So what is waste? If we can get this organic matter rotting, we've got all the manure building up around these areas, and the clovers even responded. Is that waste compared to plowing this up and starting again? So think about that in when you're making these decisions, okay? It's not waste. Then if you're lucky enough to have one of these chicken barns around, these here, that is the best trick in the book. You can see what this winter application of chicken manure did just here. You got to go light. You can't burn it because chicken manure and pig manure is hot stuff. Okay, so go about 400 pounds an acre and spread it fast. Don't put like a feedlot manure where you're doing 10 tonne an acre. And you can see here, you know, nothing happening right here. And this is home. This is just up our driveway. It's kind of a rough to see kind of picture, but just here, you can, it's spin spreader, but you can see where, you know, the spin spreader is working. So this has been fertilized and this hasn't. And this is only about a 3 to 4 week impact on the soil. So we're able to get a lot more growth. The thistles did really well too. But you can see little bits of thistles here. They're not doing quite as good. But, you know, you got to justify it these days. I give you that. But if you can say, yeah, look what it's doing for me. If you guys just try it once, leave a check strip in the middle of paddock. You do 10 acres or 100 acres. Fertilize it, or just do one pass down the middle of your paddock and check, is it worth it? Or do some and leave the middle and just see how it's all going, because it doesn't take much of a rocket scientist to look at that and say, yeah, I'm getting some results for my money. What type of forage is this? This is a huge question. All the way from, you know, Emo, Fort Francis, Ontario, right across to BC in the interior. Work with what you know works best in your area. If you're down in Shaunavon, Saskatchewan, you know, we're going to use more intermediate wheatgrasses. We're going to use more softleaf tall fescues. I'm not a crested wheat kind of fan. There's other grasses down there that'll do good, but don't forget your legumes down there. I recommend to guys everywhere, have at least 60 to 70% of your pasture stand, have it in a legume. Because if you looked around this year and had a look at the green that was growing, it was all legumes. There was sweet clover, there's your alfalfas and your sandford and your vetches. All those plants have got massive tap roots, can go mining deeper into the soil and looking for nutrition and also water as well. So keep that in mind. What works best in your area? To join a grazing group. You know, if there's a grazing group in your area or an association, find out from experience, because experience will save you a lot of money. These are kind of the broad grasses that mostly work across the prairies. You can, you know, clover doesn't work too good in southern Saskatchewan, southern Alberta. But then we look at these guys, they kind of do too. But then you've got some areas in northern Alberta too acidic. So it cuts this guy out. So figure out what's in there. And your softleaf tall fescues, that's a new breed of grasses now. It's not like your Kirkland or your, what's that other, bluegrasses or creeping red fescues. This is a bunch grass that does very, very well in most conditions. Then your good old brome grasses, your meadow and smooth brome. Orchard grasses don't do well in southern Alberta, southern Saskatchewan, and in eastern Alberta. But in the foothills and high moisture area and parklands, you can't beat the old orchard grass. That's the annoying grass that's growing up through your swaths when you're making hay. Then look at your wheatgrasses, your intermediate wheatgrass, pubescent wheatgrass, perennial, not wheatgrass, ryegrass, sorry. Look at all those and see how they would fit in the lower areas close to the border, and then they go with your wheatgrass as well. So get to know And you guys can walk your paddocks and say, geez, look at this brome stand. Look how well it's doing. All I have to do is just add some legumes in there. Okay, now we're going to go into grazing use and management. So what I call is range management is just open the gate in May or June and kick them out there and then keep on, let them keep on grazing, do what they do, and then come back and maybe move them once a month or something like that. If you can use one single strip wire in the middle of that half section of land or in the middle of a quarter section, you're going to improve your grazing days. That's going to be your start. Then you say, geez, that really worked. Then you can start rotational grazing. Rotational grazing is what I want to, that's what I do myself. And I think most of us who are busy, rotational grazing is way better than mob grazing, strip grazing, because it gives you time to have with your family, to do other jobs. A lot of us have off-farm incomes nowadays. So look at starting off with simple single hot wire fencings. If you're going to start down the regenerative trail, just let's look at putting an electric fence in and then forget about your pastures for a while. Just see what response you can get out of single hot wire crisscrossing your paddock and going back to central watering systems where the cattle are coming down laneways and they're drinking here, but they're walking back up and going into cells, either, whichever cell's open for them to go. This is an opportunity I had one year. A guy gave me pretty much this land here, 40 acres of straight alfalfa. And I said, yep, I'll take it. And he said, do you need hay and equipment? This old guy had a heart attack and he wanted a break. I said, no, hell no. I'm going to put a single hot wire up right here. I'm going to put another hot wire at the back here. I had 40 cow-calf pairs on that from about the middle of May all the way to October. Lost one heifer calf from bloat. These calves weighed about 80 pounds more average than the cattle on the conventional legume grass mix. I micromanaged the hell out of these cattle. They were, well, it wasn't bad. It was moving a fence once a day. I had a water source back down here on this fence line. So I just had this back fence at the back here. I had it kind of like a dog leg. It moved up with the cattle. Just kept rolling it up, rolling it back out again and having it move along. These cattle did so well on this pasture. It was unbelievable. So more intense strip grazing you can do if you've got the time. If you haven't got the time, look at rotational grazing. Still with electric fencing, but that's the way we got to look at it. If this is time management and you want time, then look at this. If you've got time, then strip grazing is the way to go. One thing with this, you could call it mob grazing, which you could. If you get a rain event, you better open them up and give them some more land, or take them off there and put them somewhere else, because they're going to do more damage here with their hoof and cracking crowns and pugging the soil up and making space for weeds to grow, then it's worth it. So pull them off, have them in a drier paddock if you can have it. If you find somewhere that they can beat up and it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, do that kind of system and then bring them back on here. You can introduce them slowly, but they've got the gist of it. The biome, the microbes in the rumen, they're adjusting all the time to their feed. So they're in there chewing away, and we're actually feeding the biology in the rumen, not the cow. So it's adjusting itself in here to adjust for the feed on here. Okay, this is a paddock property I've just started to rent last year. I'm doing all the fencing on here. We've got new pasture here. You can see which actually was swath grazing. And then we've got these cells here. We're running almost 50 head on this place intensively. We've got, these 15-acre cells and so on and so on. But what I'm doing here, I'm just splitting this with a portable wire. So in a good season, they can graze over here, and I just open it up and they come into here, but shutting this off. I've got one central watering system. All these wires here, like this, everything everywhere, is just one single hot wire. It's about 75 cents a foot to do this. And if you had 3 wires, well, I'll show you the next picture. 3 wires is going to cost you about $1.80, $1.70 to run 3 wires. But if you did that for the boundary, fair enough. But so this is really low cost micromanagement grazing. So this is Google Earth Pro. Get a picture of a place, figure out where your watering system is. Every paddock can get to this one central watering system. When I came to Canada, or even now, actually, people say, you know, have water readily available, have them close to the cattle. They might suggest having a waterer here, you know, another waterer, you know, well, if this is 4 paddocks, they have one here and one there. You know, have one there, have another one that works these 3 paddocks. There's no reason these guys can't walk along this fence, come back here. Healthy cattle, easy calving, exercise, get them working. We used to walk 5 miles to water at my place, not my place, my family's place in Australia. So the dugouts were 10 miles apart. But like I said, this morning they were Bos Indicus cattle, so Brahman Angus cross, Angus cattle. So they were used to this kind of thing. Okay, at the same time, we're planting our great pastures. You know, start planting posts. It doesn't have to be complicated. This is what I keep saying. Single wires like this. These posts are 30 paces apart. They don't have to be like a conventional fence. This is not a physical barrier. This is a mental barrier. This has got more power at stopping cattle than 4 barbed wires do. But it's easy to erect, like I said, about 75 cents a foot. Depends what you use. I'm using fiberglass sucker rod now, which is these guys right here. This is a boundary fence. So this is, you know, this is about $1.70 to $2 a foot to put this fence up right here. Once again, you can see 30 paces apart. We've got hot, cold, hot. Okay. Here, we just got 1 wire. Attached to this system right here, I've got 9 ground rods. Okay. This is only lighting up a quarter. This fence, this is all on the same piece of land. I've got swath grazing on this side, perennial pasture. It's about boundary fence. I have this fence like this because the energizer attaches to these wires here. This is a ground wire. So my ground wire from here taps into there. I've got ground rods close to the energizer. All the way down here at this creek, I've got more ground rods tapped into that wire there to light up the whole quarter when it gets dry or winter time. So think about when you're putting a fence in, how you want to do it. Make that your boundary fence. Make that your internal fence. Simple little thing. This is wood. Just use wood. They're used posts. They're not new. These things right now are getting up towards $8. And these posts here are $6.50. A guy out at Linden sells these. Another guy out at Claire's home sell these. They're really affordable posts. And once you start using them, you get addicted to them. This is another thing. Do not cheap out on these things. Use Gallagher, True Test, or Speed Right. Keep these models at your main function area, because don't buy anything with steel boxes, because the boxes around here, steel sweats when it heats up and gets cool, and then it starts shorting out the terminals inside. Where Gallagher and True Test and Speed Right, they're all plastic boxes like this. These companies have been around for years. They know what works and doesn't. I like the Gallagher system because this system here is in my driveway, going out in and out of the yard. All I have to do is drive down there, slow down. Look, I'm putting out 8 kilowatts, drawing 26 amps. So I'm gravy. There's nothing shorting out that fence. It's easy to read, and also you can watch it on your iPhone as well. So this is just some ideas, guys. When you're planting pasture, look at these fence lines. Look at simple fence lines. Don't go and nail this wire straight onto the wood. Use your black insulator right here, because this costs around about 51 or 41 cents, depends on the type of bags you buy. if you go and tack straight onto there, every time we get rain, that number's going to rock and roll, and this guy's going to drop. So we're starting to short out fences. So make sure you got insulators like this, and spend the dollars if you're going to put the time in, and put your insulators in as well. So I've got these fences like this too, so wildlife can move freely through the property without getting tangled up. Okay, weed control. I used to rent this land too. It's gone back into farmland, but I decided, you know, I'm going to spray it out like we showed you earlier, and then reseed it with perennial pastures. You can see a strip down there. So I ran out of chemical. It was just going to be one check strip like this, but I thought, oh, bugger it. You know, I won't go and continue on. This is only about 100 feet across. But look what it did. I still use the same blend here as what I did here and here across this whole paddock. But look at the dandelions came in. So I end up doing some weed control here. So look at really what you're doing and say, yeah, I do have weed issues. It could be anything. And put that a little extra money into getting it done right. Okay, overgrazing. I see so many great pastures end up looking like this one here. This is the boundary fence between my yearlings and my neighbors. We've got 500 head in here. We've got 120 head here on a half section of land. The water is somewhere over here, down on the south end of the property, and there's no fencing to control where they graze. They're chewing out like nothing else here close to water. Then at the north end, way up here, they've grown grass just hate off. They don't want to touch it. So now if they had a laneway running along this fence here, just running along the fence here in conjunction with it, the cattle could have come way up the back here and ate the grass, then come back down here to water. There's one water right here in this section of land here, way over just about here. Those cattle could have done just as good. This photograph was taken around the 18th of July. It's phenomenal. You can see I've let this go too fast, and it's got ahead of me, so it's already flowered out. We got to try and keep our grazing, our forages that aren't resting, keep them vegetative, keeping in boot stage. But yeah, overgrazing, I see it so often, and it's the biggest detriment to really good pasture stand. These cattle here, they will go and hunt the legumes, and the legumes will say, bugger it, I'm done. They'll just play out, and all we're left is a lower quality grass. And this is kind of what happens when the cattle are on the other side of the fence. So, you know, we've all seen this, really good forage, and you may as well have given this guy an extra acre by the time you went all the way up here. So if you want to stop this, just run a single hot wire up here. It'll kick ass, and the cattle this side won't even touch it. But here's a really well managed pasture here. And then here's someone who doesn't give a damn, and they just turn it out instead of rotational grazing. We've probably seen a lot of this in your days. Okay, access to fresh water. We have dugouts, we have watering systems. The cattle always go back to the watering systems for some reason. The fresh water, it's clean. They're not bugging up their feet. They're getting mud in between the toes, and they're not just trying to find a way around the edge of the dugout. Here, they can go straight in wherever they're going. This is at home here. I've got gravel. What I've done here is dug out a hole, put fabric down in the hole, then filled it up with gravel, and then put the water trough on top. Really simple system. Everything works tick-tock, really low maintenance. And then you can go into these energy-free nose pumps. This is at Brendan Anderson's up at Rimby. And his dad actually makes these, so he gets them at the right price. But simple systems like that. Well, this is Kevin and Roxanne Zola's at Penhold area there. You know, there's money out there from the government to do these kind of things, from ALUS program, ALUS. Sean knows all about this. There's all sorts of money out there that if you show a feasible plan and justify what you're going to do, there's money out here. This system here was paid by ALUS. It's a sensor up here. When the cattle come to drink, it kicks in the sensor here, which is solar powered. Then it's a wet well. The well is over here. They pump water from over, the dugout is over here. They pump water, comes underground up to here. This trough is all perforated with tiny little holes. So it fills up really quick. And as the cattle move away and stop drinking, it all comes right down the bottom into the bottom of this pit at the bottom here. So this is a really good system. Money out there for that. Money out there for that. Sean can clarify if there's money out there for that, but I know Alice is paying for this. And a little bit just to round off on annuals. So this is up at Jack Stalls. What he's done here is planted annuals to take some summer pressure off his perennials back here, right at the back. So there's no reason why we can't have the two together. But Jack is a cropping guy. They've got thousands of acres of cropland. So he's utilizing the cattle back on the cropland. So what he's got going off here, he's got cattle impact on the soil right here from the cattle, shitting and pissing on the soil. Then he's got diverse cover crops growing in here. But he's resting these guys over here. So he's getting diversity and rest all in one. So if you're in a situation where you can, okay, I've got some cropland, let's rest our perennial land too, have some cattle impact, get some cattle on there and move them about. And this is a really neat picture here. I was walking through the paddock one day looking at this crop growing here. And it was just round up pasture land. I just put straight cereal in. I got my thatch on here. And we're all asked to work with the environment. We're all asked to look after nature, work with nature. Well, a lot of us, you know, we do work with nature. But if I can find a guy, you see all the elk and the moose and the deer. But if I can find this little guy right here, getting in there and surviving without me disturbing his environment, I think we're on the right track. So we've gone and sprayed it. Fair enough. Tools in our toolbox. Don't chuck away tools in your toolbox. They'll always be needed. We still use chemical fertilizers. We still use chemical weed controls. You don't have to use them every single day of the week or every single month of the year, but they're tools in there when things get overtaking you. But if we've got our thatch, we've done our spraying, we put some chemical fertilizer in here to keep these going, but these guys are still living. If we can get these little guys still in our farm growing, I think we're on the right track to be regenerative agriculture. And we're not getting paid for looking after him, but we're getting paid by ourselves for doing this kind of system where we're doing regenerative agriculture. We're not using a ton of machinery, but we're getting the cattle fed to the best of their ability, to our ability, and we're getting things working in one unison. Oh, and that's it. That was a quick one. Okay. That was shorter than last week. So yeah, like, you know, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me in your house. Thanks for Amber and Grant for helping out with all this. And Grant's going to be on tomorrow night, and he's going to do the economics. So if you want to get in hold of us, you know, we're all here to give you a hand. And yeah, I think it's question times, Amber. Yeah.
Yes, you bet. Question time. There's only 2 questions here to start off. Mike says, I'm at Drayton Valley, gray wooded, lots of heavy clay. My disc drill won't cut in most times on lots of areas. Can I disc it once or twice, broadcast seed, and roll it and expect a decent catch?
Yeah, fluffing up the soil also makes a weed seed bed, right? How clean is your paddock, Mike? If you think, yeah, my paddocks are pretty clean, it should be pretty good because we've always got weed seed banks. They seem to do better than anything else, actually. But if you can have a light tilth and then you can blow it on and roll it, if that's what you got to do, you've got to work with what you got. If you look at the statistics and the research, if you're seeding 15 pounds an acre with a drill, so on and so on, then if you broadcast it on, they generally say you need about 20% more seed because you'll have seed falling in a crown of a brome or an orchard grass or a crown of alfalfa, and it'll just sit there and it'll eventually rot out, right? So that's where you've got a grass stand that's semi-production. This could happen, but yeah, like you work with what you got, mate. You just, if there's the tools that work for you, then go with it. If you can, I don't know if your county's got a drill. The hoe point drill, actually, I'm going to show you a slide. I think I still got it here. I took it out for a reason. There it is. All right, there. Okay, that one, current slide. Okay, this might address your. Okay, so this is done by PAMI, the Prairie Agricultural Machine Institute in Manitoba. This picture here shows an inverted T-boot, which was one of a modern seed pasture drill, and a hoe point and a disc drill. This shows you in different seeding conditions, the undisturbed, and so sod seeding and chem fallow. Okay, you look at these inverted T's do really well all the time, all the way through. Discs are at the bottom. They're not, this could be the situation that on this particular research farm too, but the hoe point drill right here in the middle, you can still get away with it. So these kind of things might work for you too, but broadcasting, if you're going to broadcast, then, make sure you got that little bit of tilth, you get in the soil. All our seed is dyed. So our perennials are dyed yellow and our annuals are dyed green. So you can jump out of the tractor after you've rolled it, and if you see about 5 or 10% on top of the soil, great, we know we've got it most in. Then you can part the soil and start looking for seeds at 1/2 inch seeding depth. So yeah, work with what you got, but if you can get a good drill to penetrate, hay busters are kind of light, but if you can get a drill to penetrate that soil, you can go with your 15 pounds an acre. And then that you get your best bang for your buck that way.
Yeah, Graeme, I do have a Haybuster 8000 drill, but it's very rigid and it's very hard to control depth on it, and that's why I didn't really want to use it on like the smaller seeds, and I use it on all my grains, into sod, everything else. Right.
Yep. Yeah. The down pressure, because they're spring loaded, my drills are coil tine, so when it's in the ground, it'll go through a molehill like this and bury the seed. It'll just go right through like this and bury the seed. With those lighter drills, they kind of follow the contour, but they do have a limitation, Mike, when it goes into it. So if you even tilth your soil, then use the hay buster in there, right? Instead of going into straight sod. If you can fluff that soil up a little bit, but don't mix A, B, and C horizon stuff, you can help it. Just tilth the top layer, then use your hay buster going through it. Will that help? Will that help, Mike?
Yeah, you kept breaking up, but I think I know what you meant.
Did I break up, Amber?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I have a poor internet connection, but I think I understand what you meant. I could disc it once and then use the hay buster and go very shallow.
Exactly. Right on. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
No problems.
Perfect. Next question. How about planned grazing instead of rotational grazing? I think it is a better option. More of a comment.
What is planned grazing? We did an article about this. There's amp grazing, planned grazing, rotational grazing, you name it. Whatever works for you, work with it. Like there's so many, every researcher, and there's some of us on this call right now that sit on research committees, that Ryan and Fred, but every research wants to put their own twist on it. When I first came to Canada, everyone wanted mob graze. I hate mob grazing because it's not done properly. It was developed in New Zealand and Australia, and if you don't micromanage that, then mob graze is the worst thing to do. Because they don't tell you, when you get a rain event, you better move those cattle quick. Otherwise, they're going to pug it up and you're going to have a weed fest. So whatever system you want to do, multi-paddock grazing, rotational grazing, strip grazing, whichever management works, get it working for you. Rotational grazing, That was the very first word, rotational grazing. And now people have come on. So what are you doing that's different that we can all learn by with the multi-paddock grazing? That's a question to you guys. It just seems like Jim's got his own version. Gabe's got his own version. Alan's got his own version. All these guys have got Graham, you name it. All these guys have got their own version. But basically, whatever works for you, with your time schedule, with your layout of your land, make a change and use some electric fencing, because it all uses electric fencing. So you can do whatever you want to do. You can move fences every day, or you can have cells and then rotational graze like that. So amp grazing, multi-paddock grazing, you name it, it all gets back to be roughly the same thing.
Okay, question about your presentation.
It's not a great answer, but I'll stick to it.
Okay, Graeme, a question about your presentation. At Mappings at Baymore, was the old pasture sprayed out before sod seeding?
No, it was straight sprayed in. You saw plenty of space in there. So that Terry's here if she wants to chime in. But that was just sprayed out pasture land. I'm wondering further back here. There. Yep. That just pasture land. You can see how much space we got in here. See all this brown? If you parted the grass there, you'd start seeding soil. Terry, do you want to chime in on this, or are you cool? No comment.
Chris asked, what suggestion do you have to put fat on finishers for a grass-fed operation located in southern Quebec?
What was the question? Sorry.
What would you suggest to put weight on finishing animals that are grass-fed and located legumes in southern Quebec? Yep,
legumes. You go at least 70% legumes. It doesn't matter if it's alfalfa or clovers. I've never been to Quebec. Sorry. You can use your clovers, your alfalfas, or birds for trefoil. I know does really well over there. But we need fiber to slow the rumen down, to get the nutrients absorbed by the biology into the rumen. So if you went with a 70% legume and 30% grass mix, that will do really well. Our cattle, that yearling pastures I was showing you, they weren't taken to fat. They were just taken to 850 weight cattle and then straight into a lot after that. But those cattle were doing 2.8 pounds a day, non-hormoned, EU certified heifers. And they were walking that mile and a bit, well, just under a mile to water too. So yeah, legume pastures, you can't beat it. You talk to the dairy guys. What makes milk in dairies is legumes. So yeah.
Thank you.
No problems. Thank you, Quebec. Okay.
No more questions yet.
Okay.
No at the moment anyways. But please feel free to either, you can turn on your camera and mic if you would like to ask any questions or speak up, and we're all here. Okay, question just came in. What perennial cool season grasses work well with perennial alfalfa located in Montana?
Which part of Montana?
Doesn't say yet.
In the mountains or out in Turner or south of Turner or Shelby? Like in the mountains, you can use more orchard grass, softleaf or fescues, but out, south of PJ or Turner or in that border country there, I'd be going with your intermediate wheat grasses, your fescues, and some brome. Wouldn't be using bluegrass. I wouldn't be using orchard grass. What else wouldn't I be using? Those softer, cooler weathers. So yeah, those kind of grasses would be the cool season grasses for out on the east side. And on the west side there, I've seen a lot of pastures down through, oh, you know, Kalispell, west of my Great Falls, and really, that's something Americans should be looking at is point and size of milk vetch into your pastures. It'll work really well for you. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. He said, Paul says yes, thank you.
Okay. And look, you guys, you can give Grant or I a call anytime, or Amber. We're kind of all grass people, like everybody who works for Union Forage or owners of Union Forage are cattle owners themselves. So we actually walk the walk. None of us live in town. None of our reps live in town. They've got their own operations. Plus our directors and owners of Union Forage, we're all grass guys. We're all in the cattle business. So we're learning by our mistakes and trying to help others with what we've done wrong and so on too, right? So Roger, if you want to chime in too anytime, because Roger Myers and Dana are owners of Union Forage as well. And we've got Grant Lastucci here as well. So, yeah. Oh, there's Brenda. Hi, Brenda. Your mic. There you go.
There we go. Hi, Graeme. I have a question for you about pigs.
Yeah. Feral pigs or domesticated pigs?
No, there is such a large movement, especially in Australia, UK, in parts of British Columbia, for forage fed and forage finished pigs.
Yep.
So as you look to the future, as people start to incorporate the principles of grazing into all different sorts of species, what advice do you have for those that are really curious about different ways of grazing?
Well, you got your pigs that root and the pigs that don't. Those toolies or tukis or whatever they don't root, so they can go onto a forage stand. I've worked with a couple of pig people here. Turnips, they love turnips. They go absolutely berserk. They'll get them out of the ground. They'll root them up. They'll eat them whole. Well, they'll chew at them while they're whole. So they're really good forage like that. They're a one-trick pony. Once they're out of the ground, they're done. But if we put Italian ryegrass or clovers or something like that, they're pretty much the same too, because the pigs will start ripping them out or rooting them up with their snout, and so they're pretty much done too. Where you can plant 4 pounds of turnips per acre. It'll cost you about $23, $24, or you can go and put Italian ryegrass in, which is still high sugar, high energy food. That's going to cost you about $40 an acre. So you may as well flop over to the cheaper side. And I noticed, like at home, we had feral pigs, and they always went for the turnips. They hardly touched the grass. So the turnips were gone, and the Swedes, we used Swedes back then too. They were gone before the grasses ever were. But if they're going to go grass finished and they're not a rooting pig, then a soft grass like orchard or the softleaf tall fescues and legumes, they love clovers. And if they get a taste for clovers, they'll start ripping that out too, unfortunately. But like Rob Neal over in Scotland there, Brenda, you and I know him, his wife, Jackie, she has a lot of clover in her pig fattening pastures. So yeah, if you're going to go annuals, just use a grazing turnip. Don't use a soft core turnip, because even when they walk on them, if they bust the turnip open, then it starts dying and rotting. So when you buy a turnip, make sure it's a hardcore turnip, not a soft heart turnip, because then they'll be able to take the trampling and it'll last longer. Is that a good one?
Yes, thanks, Graeme.
Hey, Graham, I've got a question.
Hey, Lonnie, how are you?
Well, sorry, I'm Dan. This is, yeah, it's just signed up with
Oh,
my wife's name, whatever.
oh,
Yeah, so you were out at our place last year, so I'm Charlie Ewing's son-in-law.
oh, yeah,
Um,
yeah. And Claire's home.
yeah. So I just had a question. I think one of the areas that we had you look at was kind of an old blown out area.
Oh, yeah. On the side
I don't
hill.
know if you remember, but
Yeah, it was on the
kind of on the
side
hills.
hill. Yep, where
Yeah, and
the
I just
juniper was growing.
Yeah, so starting to get some pine and just want to get your thoughts on an area like that, what you suggest and how we can start regenerating that.
Bale grazing.
Bale grazing. Okay, I was wondering, I thought
Yep.
that would be a perfect spot for that. Okay.
Yep, bale grazing. We talked about that there on that side hill. Like we've
Okay.
got, that's for everybody who's catching up here. That is been farmed years ago, wasn't it, mate?
Yeah, back in the 30s, I think.
Yeah, and you can still see that scar. It's
Yes. Yeah,
unbelievable.
huge.
And now this juniper and pine is growing in there and just taking over on that side hill. So
Yeah.
I think we need to get that organic matter built up there and get that hoof action going, working into that. It's almost clay now, isn't it? There's
Yeah,
hardly any.
yeah, and pretty barren, right? And
Yep. And I, especially with hay the way it is these days, you think, holy shit, really, hay, mate? But that soil needs a big impact. So next winter, I
Yeah.
wouldn't do it in the summer because we're going to get
Yeah.
washing and bogging. But
Okay.
next winter, mate, I'd be pouring the bloody hay into there and let them shit and pissing all over the soil. It'd be fantastic.
Okay. No, perfect. Thank you.
No worries, mate.
Would you consider doing green feed or strictly just hay?
I think you got no fertility in there.
Yeah.
Green feed bales, you mean?
Yeah, green feed bales.
You green feed bales or
Yes.
It doesn't matter what you use.
Okay.
Yes. Green feed, hay, whatever you can get, round bale silage, whatever's cost effective.
Okay. No, that's perfect. Thank you.
No problems. Back to you, Amber.
Yes, one more question just came in. I have a pasture with crested wheatgrass and I need something else to get more production from middle of summer to fall grazing.
Yeah.
Is the crested wheatgrass going to be a problem?
Yes, Grant can chime in on this too. We talked about this a lot, and Darren at the Deseret. Grant woke me up to this to look at the crested wheat. Looks like it's all in nice rows. It's been there for 30 years, hasn't moved. You dig a root ball up under crested wheat, it's just a mass. It's a huge mass of root system under there. So now through, it's not what you know, it's who you know that makes you look smart. Spray it out. Yep, spray it out. Start again. Put some oats in there for a year or two. I have tried with some success and some failures. I suppose it's 50-50. That those root systems under there was just phenomenal, and I never got woken up to that until Grant really pointed it out. So I'm fully in favor of smoking that out. It's a useless grass. It's good to have in a bit of a blend as a part of a blend, but man, maybe 5%. I know it greens up quicker, but it also dies out quicker in a drought. So do you have anything to add to that, Grant? He's not going to. Oh, yeah, here we go. You there, Grant?
It's competition above and the below ground. Sorry about that. And it's timing. So the crested starts early in the spring. So it is got to jump on many others. And so you're looking for bare soil, as Graham talked about, but you're also looking at your competition you're playing against and trying to work within it. And by the time it's dried out the soil, then it's hard to do things with it later in the summer or such.
Hey, Sean McGrath, you got anything you want to say about that too? Are you there, Sean? He's not even. Oh, there you go.
There we go. We've used it. I like it for some applications. In our neighborhood, I love it in April. But you have to be willing to fence it and smash it and get the cattle off. You can't use this set it and forget it grazing method.
Yeah. Have you got legumes in amongst yours, mate?
Oh, stupid amounts.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's there when it's good in early, and then the legumes, you know, they're the ones that are putting the feed back into the cattle, right?
Which legumes, Sean, do you have in there?
Oh, mostly alfalfa. Some of those pastures that will start fairly heavy crested wheat in the spring. If you smash them, they'll come back, and in June, July, they'll be 90% alfalfa or more, just on a volume basis.
Yeah. So it's a part of the system then, right?
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing on the 15th of April. It's not that nice on the 15th of July.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Does anybody else have some comments? Ryan, you want to have a chime in, or Roger? Because you guys are out in that tougher country. Sorry?
Yeah, I don't have any crested wheat at my place. At Dad's, we had a little bit, but it, left a lot of bare ground, and I wouldn't say it was that good of a grass out there either. And I haven't even really tried it too much out here, just because of what I'd seen there, where it kind of get moldy and clump up, and then, kind of compete the other stuff out where you ended up with lots of areas where nothing else would grow, and the crested wheat didn't grow in it either.
Right. So it's really horses for courses, eh? For where you are and what you want to do with early pasture. Anybody else got some on crested wheat? Because it's kind of one of those things, trying to find crested wheat now, seed without downy brome in it. That's a huge issue. Ryan and I have seen some research, and both Ryan and I sit on BCRC, and we haven't funded some of this crested wheat research because they can't guarantee downy brome not being in the seed. That's something to think about as well, because once we've got downy brome, man, we're cheek grass, downy brome, we're kind of in a world of hurt. So yeah, something to think about as well. Okay.
I think that's everything for questions right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's one, Amber, about sowing alfalfa into the crested wheat for Sean.
There you go.
Okay, must have missed it. Would you like to just read it, Grant? Sorry.
This is from Paul from Montana. So did you sow the alfalfa into the crested wheatgrass, Sean?
You actually put it in together as part of a blend, like, oh God, before crested wheatgrass was blasphemous, so 30 years ago probably. We have a little bit, we're gonna try some, but no, it all went in as a blend at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's horses for courses with it. I know there's good grass out there. Pick your battles, I guess. And maybe you have that paddock at the beginning of the season, so you can carve on it, you can bash it up before you head out to your high production pastures too. So it's good. Like I say, tools in your toolbox. Don't plant the whole farm to it, but if you've got places close to home, we've done this. Ike at Rosetown there, we had what do we have out there? Perennial ryegrass, Ike? Can't remember. But it's not something that's going to go out and be big production outside, but for what you want to use it for, if you have it crested wheat in calving pastures close to home, you're going to hammer the hell out of it. It's going to have a lot of nutrient uptake, and then you've got your cattle moving away. I don't know, is it used a lot down there in Montana, Paul? doesn't want to. Can you hear me,
Paul
Paul?
says there's a lot of it around there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Maureen commented that she has crested wheatgrass in our one paddock for early spring, and it was in a blend.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So Maureen's in some harder country on the well, just below Sean, really, on the border of Alberta and Saskatchewan. So, you know, it can get pretty dry out there, but you pick your battles, what works for you and what it's going to be designed for your particular pasture land and grazing use.
We know that Jim Bauer puts a little bit in his mixes all the time. So
Yeah.
it did save a lot of that East Country and the Palliser Triangle through the dirty 30s after. So you got a soft spot, I suppose, for that. I wonder what Roger's got to say on it.
Yeah, on crested wheat overall, yeah, small amount is great, and it is a good thing for very dry areas for sure. Soil stabilizer, and it is dependable. But to echo the other guys, yes, use it early and then get them out of there. And it will come back late in the year too. But again, give it that rest period through the summer. But yeah, just don't rely on it too heavily for the full season of grazing, and yeah, go light in a blend.
Yeah, there's better grasses out there, but you know, some of them can't take the trampling as what crested does. But intermediate wheatgrass is tough too, and the cattle like that. So yeah,
certainly that early spring growth is something you guys are looking for that, and a lot of other grasses don't quite do that. Metabrome can come up there, I guess, closer, but I don't know, Roger, how that works for you as other early grasses go.
Yeah, no, crested would still be king in that aspect. Definitely the first thing to use, and it's pretty durable. You can hammer it, and like I say, then you have to give it its rest.
Just Brad Mappin here, Graham. I don't know that you can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you, Brad.
I finally figured out how to get the mic turned on here. Otherwise, we were question, but I didn't know how to get in there to answer. So basically, that piece was grazed right off before we went in and seeded, and then basically seeded. The question I have for you is, we seeded some other grass down that we've got a terrible mess of foxtail in there, and I'm not sure whether I got to take that out of there again. Start over.
Foxtail.
Have to do.
Yeah, foxtail is scourge of the prairies. Well, it's right up there with kosher.
Yeah.
This is where I'll send some pictures to you. So over at Rosetown, Big Rose Colony, we've been subsoiling in amongst the foxtail. They've got this lowland, and it's getting a little salty down there, a bit of alkali conditions happening. So what we've done is subsoiled the area, but we've subsoiled up high, so the moisture isn't bringing mineral down into the lower area. And having that aerobic activity in the soil has really helped the other grasses get away, because, as you know, foxtail roots, you can pull it out and there's about that much foxtail left in your head. It's not left, it's in your head. It comes out in one chunk, right? So I would love to see, if you had that area. The problem with foxtail, we can kill it every single day of the week, but there's such a prolific thatch of seed. You've got the foxtail growing up like this, and it drops its seed down, and if you scratch around, all you find is layer and layer of foxtail seed. So I would love to be able to burn it, and I've seen that work so well in counties that will let you burn, and it just takes out the whole plant. The whole plant's gone. And we've got the plant gone, and it won't recover. We've got the thatch of seed sitting right here. It's taken out as well. And we really showed that off up at Bigger. So I think that's a really good way. There's chemical called COW-50. And it is $50 an acre for that stuff. It is expensive, but it's a granular, and it'll kill the shallow root systems. I think it's for 1 or 2 years. I forget what it does now, Brad. You'd have to talk to a Bayer, but it's still a chemical. But I still think that we've got to look underneath the soil with foxtail, because it's in soil where it's hard, it's really compacted, and you can pull that root out and you can see it just layering right here, the bottom of the root system. So yeah, foxtail's a scourge of the prairies for grazing guys anyway. So you can use curb 50, you can burn it, but when you do burn it, subsoil it so we can get aerobic activity going, and then we can get roots going down deeper from grasses that are more useful to us in the grazing business. I'll send you some pictures of that, Brad.
Interesting about that, Graeme, is that's actually up on hilltops.
Oh, so it's not low.
And it's actually in looser ground that was crop land that we didn't find out the problem until we planted it down to grass, and it's actually fairly sandy type soil. So it's kind of bizarre to me that
Yeah, it's not in a low area where it's alkali.
On hilltops.
We'll have to come and have a look at it. You got any ideas, Grant, or anybody else has got any ideas on foxtail barley? Chime in.
We know that the Chinook Applied Research Association had worked on AC saltlander, the green wheatgrass, and the challenge with it was it always kept some downy brome or Japanese brome in it to some percent, even when it said 0. So that was a challenge, but it did outcompete the work Ellen Owasa and Diane Westerland did at Chinook Applied Research Association at OIN. Did show it did outcompete the foxtail barley and slowly take over the stand. And yes, we were looking at picking it up this year with Union, but we haven't so far.
Graeme, I had some on cropland as well, had some real issues with foxtail. And what I eventually did was wired that area off and used it for early grazing. And then eventually weakened it a little bit and got in there. But I have a question that's probably, I want to know about the emergence of it with other crops. Is there an opportunity to go in with the animals and do a glean, or does it not emerge fast enough to do that?
I'm not really sure. Grant, you got any ideas, or anybody else got some ideas on that? I'm not 100% sure, Brenda.
I think Brenda's got a point there. When I was out at Chinook and we saw one of the sites with the Chinook Applied Research Association, and I forgot the rangeland agrologist who was there at the time. He's about 6'7". They did graze the foxtail barley early and then got out of there. And they found that the Western wheatgrass was slowly coming in more and more. So it was something in the special areas tour we had at Big Stone that time that they shared as a tool that had some promise.
It's Ryan here. So out here we get foxtail barley around our sloughs where it's kind of just wet enough it'll drown out the alfalfa and meadow brome. And I had a mix that had some tall fescue in it. And I was cutting the field for hay when it was first seeded down, and I left a strip of tall fescue around the outside. And it seemed like with it getting to go to seed, it kind of got mixed in with the foxtail and started choking it out. And then I ended up grazing that field. And now the tall fescue's totally cleaned up all that foxtail where it's, not really a bunch of tall fescue on the high ground, but all those strips around where it was too wet. The tall fescue did really good and got rid of all of the foxtail.
So having good competition, right? Huh?
Yeah, just getting that seed there where it can kind of get started, and then with tall fescue, that was quite a while ago, and it was some kind of a common variety that was pretty coarse, and the cattle, they'd eat it in the fall pretty good, but they didn't just like it as good as the rest, so it got to go to seed a little bit, and that got rid of all of the foxtail barley in that field.
That'd be Courtney 31, I think, probably. I've got it myself. It's pretty competitive, you're right, because it is shallow rooted, the foxtail barley. And of course, your fescues are deep rooted, so they allow for that competition in a strong point.
Yeah. So Brenda's had an annual scenario, and Ryan's had a perennial scenario.
I think foxtail's a bit of a coward, actually, of a plant, and it seems that if you can get in there and graze it and then give it some competition, it will submit eventually, but it takes a little bit of discipline to manage those areas.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, Amber, it's up to you.
Yeah, no more questions here. There's been some great discussions and everything. If no one has anything else to say, we can end tonight's Zoom meeting and hopefully see everyone back tomorrow.
Yep. So grants it tomorrow at 7 o'clock,
Yep.
and doing all the economic side, and then and then one more next week to round it off. This is the first time we've done this, so we've got someone technical like Amber to handle us old guys, and so we'll probably have some more of these. But and I'd just like to say thanks for guys to coming on tonight, and last week is too, and then tomorrow night put the numbers to what we talked about today, and then next week we're just going to have a few guys, kind of like a panel more or less, just talking about what they do on the practical side as well. So you're getting it from a broad brush. So thanks very much, everybody, for coming.
Sounds good. Okay, see you guys tomorrow.